Thanks so much for having me speak. This is the first time I've really shared publicly this project, and yeah, I'm very excited to share. Wilderhoods is a project I've been working on for the last few years with my colleague Ada Naino, who's here also at the Castlemaine Institute. And I'd like to acknowledge that all the work we've done so far in Wilderhoods has been on Jara country, and I really hope that our work can support the amazing work of Jara and in healing this upside down country. Wilderhoods really came out of a recognition of the need for habitat, refuge corridors through urban areas, and that so far what we see often is habitat gardens that are islands within the urban matrix. And so we were really looking to see how we could deal with this difficult problem that Nick Williams talked about. A lot of our urban landscape is within urban gardens, but also across tenures. And how can we mobilise community to get behind creating corridors and refuge through this landscape? And there's a trick. I'm just going to flick past this. So some core principles we're working on with Wilderhoods is that we're creating habitat for both wildlife and people. And we're really working to help people understand that there is a lot of parallels between human needs and wildlife needs. People want to see a beautiful garden. Well, you saw those beautiful meadows that Nick was sharing, beautiful pollinator corridors. So how can we realise what humans need and wildlife need in the urban landscape? Wilderhoods is also very much about bringing neighbours to work together. How can we rally people to get behind a project within the place where they live? And it's also about growing resilience to climate change through growing connection. So it's not just about creating habitat for biodiversity, it's about building social cohesion, connecting people to nature, improving human well-being, and connecting nature to nature through the landscape. So when we started developing this idea of Wilderhoods, we were really keen on finding an approach that was not a cookie-cutter approach, and that we could take a process out to neighbourhoods that could really understand that place, that community, the nature in that landscape. And it could move the community from coming together to a shared vision and a project that people could get behind. And it felt really important that there were these threads running through our work that were about people understanding place, people understanding each other, people understanding the nature where they live. So we designed a series of 4 workshops. This diagram represents the 4 workshops plus moving into doing in green at the bottom. Each workshop is thinking about building connection, building direction for that community involved, and providing knowledge and know-how that build capacity within the community. And the hope is that once the community has participated in a workshop series, that will lead to ongoing doing. So we were really fortunate back in 2022 to receive some funding from Adapt Loddon Mallee from DECA to pilot our project in what we call the West End neighbourhood of Castlemaine. And we chose this neighbourhood because they were already quite networked. They had an resilience group, they had an email group, and we thought they'd be quite sympathetic to the project, so it felt like an easy place to start and test our ideas. We learnt a lot in our first series, and then we were lucky to get further funding from WWF's Innovate to Regenerate Challenge. And this time, we wanted to evolve the project and trial it in a different neighbourhood. And this one turned out to be my own neighbourhood, which was a little bit more confronting. How's it going to go? My neighbourhood wasn't well networked. People didn't know each other very well. It also was lacking some really valuable things, like in the West End neighbourhood, they had a hall where we could run our meetings. Southside neighbourhood, we had to put up a gazebo on the nature strip. People brought a chair, we'd light a fire in a fire bowl, boil a billy, and we generated a community vibe right out on the nature strip. And when the weather got too cold, someone rolled up the roller door of their garage and we moved our chairs inside. So our first workshop we called Tuning In, really tuning into this place, this community and the nature that's here. So each workshop is comprised of a number of different activities. There's 12 activities overall, and I can't talk about all of them, but I'll share some of them with you. So after hopefully a welcome to country, if we can invite traditional owners to come in and do a welcome to country, or we do an acknowledgement to country, then we share a story of place. If you're in a hall, on the screen, if you're on the nature strip, in a booklet, and it goes through the history of traditional owners in this place, the geological history, what vegetation was here prior to colonisation, what still remains, and share some stories of urban renewal and transformation to get the juices flowing. Really foundational is people sharing what they value about living in the neighbourhood and cultivating a culture of respectful listening within the community. Of course, in every neighbourhood there's a diverse range of values and opinions, and just by sharing why you moved here, why you love this place, it opens up some beautiful conversations and connections between people. And then we're starting to ease people into thinking about the animals in their neighbourhood. And we present some simple flyers that people can take home about who might be living in their neighbourhood. And to make it accessible, we're grouping animals into broad groups, broad feeding groups, so that they can get their eye in without having to know and identify species. And everyone can go home with a checklist of animals that they might find, and they're invited over the next month to check off animals that they see or that they have seen. And they can just record broad details if they don't know who it was. So these workshops run every month. We ran the Southside ones on a Saturday morning. In the month between our first two workshops, Ada and I went away and got a satellite map, and we just mapped what vegetation, what native vegetation existed in the neighbourhood. So where were there native trees, where were there trees and shrubs, where were there ground covers. This habitat map was really important for our future work together. Next, we come together in a workshop that we title Orienting. What broad direction do people want to face together? We're not setting any goal, but where do we want to go together as a community? This workshop's really about providing people initially with lots of information about what they can do to nudge their neighbourhood in a wildlife-friendly direction and make it more climate resilient. So we share what we call a habitat mandala of elements for wildlife. You add any element and you will be creating some sort of habitat for wildlife, trees, shrubs, water. And we just give simple stories about how each element will benefit wildlife, build the food chain. And then we get people to think and dream about what they'd like their neighbourhood to look like in the future. People do a little visioning exercise, and then they're invited to write down on an index card what they'd like to see, smell, hear in their neighbourhood in 10 years' time. And then they share that vision in small groups, and then we start to brainstorm a word cloud of what we'd like for this neighbourhood collectively. And before the next workshop series, we invite anyone who's a wordsmith in the community to get together and craft a vision for that neighbourhood. And I can't read the whole thing now, but the vision for the Southside neighbourhood starts with, in the spirit of the yellow gums, beautiful remnant yellow gums, our Southside neighbourhood is resilient and thriving. And this vision finishes with, nature is protected and people feel safe. And that is a really important thing in this community, and I think many, that people are worried about risks of fire and flood and snakes, and they really want to know how they can create habitat without increasing these risks. So it's partly education and it's partly around designing well and helping people to design well. Our final two workshops are co-designing, so rolling our sleeves up and getting a design a vision of what habitat can be created across the neighbourhood, and moving people from this broad vision to a first best move project that they can undertake together to get the neighbourhood mobilised. Sitting behind these two workshops is what we call the habitat design tool that I don't have time to go through, but it really outlines the process that you can go through, starting with your vision and your habitat map and moving into a project that we often pitch as create one habitat refuge, pick it and work out the best place and the best type of habitat that's going to work for people and wildlife here. So yeah, we call this the neighbourhood compass, our habitat map, our vision, and also we work with the community to identify some animal guides that we can hold in our mind as we're designing habitat together. To choose the animal guides, we had an election. Ada put together a beautiful meet the candidates, and then people were offered a ballot paper and they could vote above the line for one species or below the line for a party. So Leatherware Party, the Legalised Grasslands Party, the Nightlife Party. And we came up with, from that, 3 hero species to guide our work. We then had an activity where we encouraged people to look at their landscape through the animal's eyes. And we provided information about our heroes, and people were invited to read about what they needed, what the threats were, a bit about their ecology, and then to really look around and see what was there and what was missing for those species. And then we got out the whiteboard again, and we thought, let's go through the habitat elements that you could add here. What do our heroes need? What's here, what's missing, and now what do you, the people, want to see more of in this neighbourhood as well? What's here and missing for you? So Southside neighbourhood, it was a very hot, exposed neighbourhood with not enough trees, so that was something that was identified for urban cooling. Next, we put out our habitat map, and we invited people to think about where are all the places of potential that you could do your work. Tenure blind. And we have some ways of thinking about that. What are the nudgeable gardens? The existing gardens that you could add some elements and nudge it in a wildlife-friendly direction. Are there any gardens in waiting? Maybe lawns, bare ground, where you could actually put in a whole new garden. What about neglected corners or remnants needing care? And people mapped all of this out to look at all of those places that we could be working in across the neighbourhood. And then we finally picked one key location where we were going to make a refuge, and we chose it for the blue wren. And we decided to do it outside Berry Perry on the Wrights Place. Berry has been a wildlife carer. She loves gardening. She doesn't have a lot of capacity to do the work anymore, but she would love to water an area of land and care for it. So then really building confidence in the community, we want to create a refuge for blue wrens at Berry's Place. What does a recipe for this refuge look like? What does the blue wren need? We went through and thought about criteria for habitat for the blue wren. And then what do the people need? What do people want to see if they're going to build something on the nature strip? What's going to please the community as well? And then think about the constraints. What are the council policies? What are the limitations with fire risk? And we crafted that up into a recipe for a wren refuge. It lays out the elements that you can put in. It talks about how far apart, ideally, you would have these refuges across this landscape for the blue wren to safely move through. And on the back of the page, it lists a bunch of species that would be really good candidates for planting, with lots of options for people to make choices there. And finally, we move into the ongoing doing within the community. People have their recipe. We have somebody in both neighbourhoods we've worked in has put up their hand to do a bit of coordinating, and it's just a simple task of we all brainstorm what activities we want to do each month, and then they just send out a list of what the activities will be and send out an email reminder, so it's not too onerous. Making a wren refuge outside berries was a bit of a challenge. We probably picked the harshest bit of ground anywhere. It's been a car park for a long time, bare Castlemaine compacted clay. So we're like, what do we need to be able to make this refuge? We need to understand how to deal with these soils. Lucky enough to have Jess Drake in our community who did her PhD on mine site rehabilitation. And so she came and gave us her advice, which was to get out jackhammers and dig deep and add plenty of organic matter, actually, to allow the water to drain into the soil and to let it sit for 6 months. So we did that. And people wanted to learn more about plant propagation. They wanted to be involved in buying the plants. So we went out to a local native nursery. And just a few months ago, we've actually put those plants in and they're all doing quite well. So some of the key things that have come out of this project, as well as we're starting very slowly to create habitat through the neighbourhood. There's people who've pulled out Protosporum hedges in their gardens and put in native plants. They're sort of seeing changes within the community of what they're going to grow in their garden. So there's benefits for wildlife. We haven't monitored the wildlife though. But there's also the benefits for people when we evaluate people's feedback on being involved. 10 out of 10 people have said they feel more connected to where they live and they feel more connected to each other. And we're seeing people we never even knew were in the neighbourhood are coming out having cups of tea, checking in on each other. And that feels just really important in terms of climate resilience with any sort of big extreme weather event, disaster. People are much more connected now, so we feel pretty happy about that. People have responses like, I love the whole experience, a really deepening series that's improved and changed my outlook to become less human-centric. Wilderhoods has increased my enthusiasm and knowledge in growing native plants and improving habitat. I'm inspired to get to work along with neighbours and hopefully inspire other neighbours to join. And we've certainly seen that. There's people who won't come to the workshop series, although a lot of people will come to find out what their neighbours are doing. But other people are starting to approach and check in and get involved. So that feels like it's just feeding out in the community. If you'd like to find out more, I don't have a QR code. On the Castlemaine Institute website, we have a report that describes our process in more detail, or you can get in touch. I'm very happy to chat. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a couple of questions for Cassia. This lady in the brown jumper, yeah.
Hi.
This is such an exciting program and project, so congratulations.
Thank you.
It sort of screams out almost to be relevant nationally. Is it something that you're sort of looking at doing, like using as a template and taking it to councils?
Yeah. When we got funding from WWF, and they were all about how are you going to scale this, so we did think really big. And we do have a model for scaling. The funding climate is tricky, but we're currently working hard. We feel like the best way, we just want to share tools and resources to enable others to do it. But yeah, we're currently looking for funding to be able to get tools and resources online, including train the trainers, so that it can then be rolled out through councils. Because when we've talked to a lot of councils who are very interested, but the initial cost is a little prohibitive to get specific tools and resources for each council. But we are excitingly talking to Bendigo City Council. Their team, their environment team is really keen, so we're exploring opportunities there as well. But keep you posted.
Hi, Cassia.
Hi.
This is, truly deadly. Well done, and this is amazing stuff. Castlemainians, yay, we rock. I just wanted to ask though, I think it would be a wonderful idea if we could, in fact, involve or incorporate like Uncle Rick or other First Nations mob in there who have sort of some key knowledges about the animals that you're trying to bring back into those spaces, or to make beautiful habitat and caring for country for those animals or birds and whatever, it would be lovely for us to be able to share with the group that you're working with the actual cultural connections that people have with those specific animals, if it is something that Uncle Rick or Jara or anybody else would be willing to talk about. I know I talk about it from a Wadawurrung perspective, like what do cockatoos mean to us, you know, and
Yes.
we can share those type of knowledges, and that way that deepens also the understanding, deeper more so than just the birds and that, but why from our point of view are they so special.
100%, Kellyanne, thank you for that. Yeah, I think the relationships and the cultural relationships is so much more deepening than just providing scientific stories. And we're super keen to work with traditional owners, and we're definitely in the next phase of our work, I mean, we're wanting to get funding to be able to support working and partnering with traditional owners and going back over our whole process and how can First Nations people actually have input into what the process is in the right way, especially in that first workshop of tuning in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely in our hearts and minds, yeah.